here to commemorate the historic Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says that people throughout this planet, whether in rural areas or urban areas, small towns, big cities, all have a right, an inalienable right, to key essential services, right? This Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Health, housing, clean water. Many of us underscore clean energy because we recognize that by living the reality, by understanding how we as a human family can help throughout this planet, people exercise their right to those essential services. This is how we build the future that the world so desperately needs and deserves. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing your part. And we look forward to an incredible conversation today as we talk about a report just put out, hot off the press, by the Global Distributors Collective, looking at opportunities in clean energy access for hard-to-reach places around the world. The first of its kind report on the state of the sector. Who's doing what where? What does that look like? So we have, just off the plane from the UK, colleagues from the Global Distributors Collective who will give us an overview of the report. And then we have a bit of a reality check. With Solar Sister being one of the premier organizations focused on women entrepreneurs that are actually delivering solar innovations to communities that are last mile communities around the world. So we'll be able to hear directly from the report authors. Emma and Charlie is here as well. And then we'll be able to do some reality testing. And then we come back to you for Q&A. Does that sound okay? You all ready? Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, without any further ado, we will turn this over to Emma to sort of lay out what you see as the key findings. What's so cool about this report that you want to make sure everybody here in DC understands and leaves here with tonight?
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much, Amira and the Shine team and the Energy Access Happy Hour for hosting. This is really exciting. We're very happy to be here. So tonight, obviously we've all got food, we've all got drinks, we want to be networking, we want to be chatting. I'm not going to go through a 200-slide PowerPoint with you guys about this report. But really what we want to do is give you a bit of a flavour of this report to tell you a little bit about the last mile distribution sector and talk a little bit about what we as an energy access community can really be doing to engage with this sector, because we do believe that the last mile distribution sector does have real potential to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly SDG 7. Just a little bit about the Global Distributors Collective. We are a collective of about 140 last mile distribution companies around the world. Our members are working in over 40 countries and cumulatively have sold about 13 million beneficial products to last mile households. And we have two main goals. So first of all, we provide a bunch of services to support our members to grow and to scale. And we also provide a collective voice for the ecosystem. So we raise the profile of last mile distributors and we help other stakeholders to work more effectively to support what last mile distributors are doing on the ground. So the report that we have just launched kind of has two main components. So the first main component is providing a little bit of an overview of the sector. Who are all these companies? What are they doing? What impact are they having and why do they matter? And then the second part of the report looks at three of the really big challenges that these guys are facing on the ground. Procurement, sales efficiency, and access to finance. And then talks a little bit about what are some of the solutions to overcoming those challenges and what are some of the emerging innovations in the space. So I'm not going to talk about all of that today, but I want to give you a few sort of fun facts about the sector, and then I want to hone in on this one particular challenge around access to finance. And I'm going to call on Catherine to, as Amira put it, give us a bit of a reality check. Our members, just to caveat, are, as last mile distribution companies, they are organisations who are selling beneficial products to last mile households, and they generally have a revenue of less than $5 million per year. So we care about distributors for a whole bunch of reasons. So first of all, they sell beneficial products, and not just energy products. So distributors are selling They're selling, yes, solar lights, improved cook stoves. They're selling nutrition products, water purifiers, health products, a whole range of beneficial goods. And some of those goods do provide complete access. So if you give someone an improved cook stove, you are providing complete access to clean energy. Some of them, like a solar light, represent an interim solution, but they are still a very critical solution because obviously if we're talking about expanded infrastructure and service delivery to reach last mile households, that's going to take a long time, and beneficial products are a critical interim solution for a lot of these households. And in selling beneficial products, they are really bridging the access gap. So you'll see here that on average, our members have sold products to 167,000 last mile households. And if you extrapolate that across our entire membership, I mean, we're talking about 23 million people, and that's a pretty significant swath of the last mile population. So they have an extensive reach. They're also creating jobs all along the value chain, and a lot of them, like Solar Sister, are very explicitly targeting women and doing a lot to empower women as entrepreneurs and as end consumers. What I really love about what distributors do is that they are genuinely serving last mile communities. So you'll see here that 75% of the customers who are served by distributors live in poverty on less than $3.20 a day, and actually 44% of customers served by distributors live in extreme poverty on less than $1.44 a day. So they are reaching a consumer segment that no one else is really reaching. And in doing that, they are also really building markets in a way that no one else is doing. So they are generating demand for products that communities have previously not been exposed to. They're building trust. They're often creating a credit history. And in doing all of that, they're paving the way for other organizations to come in and work with these last mile communities that are previously invisible and neglected. So this slide is quite important because it dispels one of the big myths about last mile distribution companies. A lot of people think that last mile distributors procure really cheap, crappy products from China and then come and dump them all on the doorsteps of last mile households and then disappear. And that's really not the case. We've really found from our research that actually distributors really do care about quality and they really do care about customer service. Okay, so with that, as I said, we're going to dive into one particular challenge, which is around access to finance, and who better to talk about the challenges around access to finance than a distributor. So I'm going to pass over to Catherine to take it.
Great segue into the challenges of finance, because the challenges of finance map very differently to those three different categories of last mile distributors. I think as the Solar Sister's been around for about 10 years, and we're a nonprofit, we focus very much on the impact. And I think the biggest challenge for us has always been our motivation, and where we're drawn is into that last mile broken, failed market. We are, our impact is what drives us, and so the further you go, the more last mile it is, and the more the harder to reach, which also means, frankly, the economics are much more difficult, the more the impact is. And so figuring out ways of measuring that social return on investment, does it make sense to go to that last mile, and being able to share with others what that social return is, and making sure that people are ready to finance and invest in social return as well as economic return. And the market has, the financial market, and I come from a banking background, and social return is not necessarily our language, So financial return, I think most of the financial market knows very, very well. And so it's finding this in last mile distribution. It really is building out something that doesn't yet exist. And the financial return on that's going to be very low, if at all. And so finding those financial structures that can address that big challenge, I think is what we have found to be the most challenging.
Most of our members are using sales agent networks, and that's because a lot of the products that they're selling do require that face-to-face contact with end consumers. So you do need people going door to door, demonstrating how a product works, giving people the chance to touch and feel and experience a product. A lot of members also use retail outlets as a distribution channel, and that's both independent retail outlets and also their own proprietary retail shops that they set up. And often retail outlets are a good distribution channel for products that maybe do already have some level of demand, that people do understand they're more pull products than push products. And a lot of distributors also work through partners, and they're mostly community-based organizations, health clinics, schools, and so on. So quite a broad range.
And so, investment in experimentation is pretty tough because experimentation thrives on failure. You try something and it works, or you try something and it doesn't work. If you are, either of those scenarios is a success for someone who is trying to experiment because they're going to learn something from it. But there's only one of those scenarios that is a success if you're a funder. And that is the one that actually works. And so finding funding streams that can support experimentation, I think, is really important. And then you have the longer term people like Solar Sister who are in it for the impact. And we're bringing in a variety of different revenue streams, grants, fees, sales, and trying to blend all of these different revenue streams and trying to manage the expenses that go with them. And again, finding funders that can appreciate some kind of blended finance is an answer for helping this segment grow. And then you have the longer term, steady, more commercial players. And for them, the challenge is really finding that balance in the market where they are serving the last mile customer, but they're going to be constrained by their need to make a return, to break even and make a return on investment for their investors. And that parameter keeps them often from going to the last mile. And so it creates a bit of a gap where they can't, when they make their decision, should I go to the next house? Should I go to the next customer that's going to be less commercial? They're going to have to choose no because they have an investment vehicle that is, a funder who is looking for their return on investment, and they're not going to be able to achieve it that way. So that limits their abilities. So the fact that we do have this variety of different kind of players in the last mile market means we have a variety of needs in the last mile market for financing. What is the financing that's available that has kind of successfully closed it? And I would say that valley of death actually over the last 10 years has gotten a bit deeper and a bit broader. And the reason is when we first started, there was philanthropy that came into this market and was really, that's how people thought it was going to be solved. That, we knew that the governments didn't have the political will to extend grid out to the last mile market. And so philanthropy was closing that gap. And then what happened was, as impact investing came along and started to pick up some of especially with the pay-as-you-go models and the ability to, and that uses huge capital, and the capital came in and started paying, it attracted a lot of the impact investors. And once they showed up, philanthropy looked at that and said, our job is done here. We have prepared this market, and the private sector is here now. And then what happened over the next few years was, I think, the last mile distributors, who were the pay-as-you-go distributors, realized, but we have to give a return back to our impact investors. They want their money back and they want a return on it. We can't do that in the last mile. And so they started pulling back from the last mile market. So when you look at the last mile market, the philanthropy left because they thought the private market was there, and then the private market left because they couldn't get their return on investment there. And so I would say it's more of a desert, it's a bigger desert than it was 10 years ago. So one of the things that we need to see happen is philanthropy come back in where it's appropriate, and in a way that's appropriate, that doesn't destroy the market. Some of the ways that we've seen that happening recently, which I really like, are some of the results-based financing, because they're really taking a look at, we know this can work, and it might need a little bit of, financing to oil it, and we can help you do that in a way that aligns the results and the financing and gets the money where it needs to go. So I think that's been a pretty successful. We're not seeing a lot of it, but where it's happening, it's been helpful. And you can probably have some other ideas of ways.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's totally right, and I also think that there is the challenge with the grant funding that's out there is that it tends to be very short term, and building a distribution business is not a short term undertaking. It takes a long time to build a distribution model that works and to build those relationships of trust in a community. So grants that last for 1 year and then they fall away, you're not going to build a sustainable business model in that time. And the same is true of debt. A lot of distributors really struggle with loans that have a term of 12, 18, 24 months. So longer term loans are also needed to see them through that valley. And I think equity plays a really important role, but distributors can't access equity until they've got proof by having debt on their sheets. So I think it's a big question, and there's a role of all three types of capital in that valley. And part of the challenge is that distributors themselves often don't know what type of capital they need, and they're often talking to the wrong people and having the wrong conversations. So there needs to be a level of education to support distributors to understand their own capital needs, and there needs to be support to donors and investors to make sure that they are providing appropriate capital. And I don't know if you want me to respond to this question as well. Mark's got his hand up.
I want to do the mini-grid part of this. So I didn't want it to be left that there's an evolution that last mile eventually becomes mini-grid takes over. It doesn't evolve that way in the energy ladder. What tends to happen is that there are spots for home solar / distribution, last mile distribution, and that's here, and then there's microgrid, and it's all based on connections. Particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, you don't have an energy power issue, you have an energy distribution. So what's the best way to distribute? So at the end of the day, the statistics show about 50 to 60% of sub-Saharan Africa is going to be done by mini-grids, but the other 50%, 40 to 50% has to be done by distribution, both PICO and home solar. And those aren't evolutionary. Well, and SEMA's here tonight, so we can use them as well. So blended finance, what that does is it allows a couple of things. One, the cost of capital to distributors and to others. If you're an energy distributor, we call them energy champions, and you're in India, let's skip around the globe a little bit. If you go there for debt, debt can be 20%. The concessional debt players in India, now you're in concessional, they're thinking they're giving it to you below market. They're going to do about 15, 16%. But if you can erect a fund where you blend in debt and grants, what you can do is the grants can be used for a lot of different purposes, but it can be used for a first loss. So those first 10%, 20% of losses that might happen, the investor doesn't have to pay for those. The grants will take care of those. So what you can do is you can crowd in a lot larger investors into that fund. So one of the primary examples of blended finance is actual funds like SEMA, like SunFunder, that was given a $5 million grant by IKEA Foundation. Let's take the SunFunder one, where IKEA gave them $5 so that SunFunder could go down the street to OPIC and ask for $50 million. And so that's kind of what's happening. The foundations could look at that grant capital and say, wow, it's highly catalytic, it's 10x catalytic. Only certain foundations are really seeing it that way, many are not yet, and that's something that Shine needs to work on.
So it is a slightly different part of the sector.
All right, so I'll address your question, which is like, with these kind of challenges, what do we do? These really, unfair practices and sort of these, it's out of your control kind of challenges. And I think one of the best things we can do is collectively work together, speak up. GDC is formed for this very purpose, to create sort of a collective voice so that this industry does start to become more, have a sense of best practices, start to look out for each other, and create a pathway that, when somebody is engaging in off-market practices, there's all the rest of us who start to bring it together. And also we have a collective voice that we can make changes in policies, start to have influence in ways that can really make a difference, so that you're not by yourself fighting against this behemoth organization or, the behemoth of, fossil fuels that are subsidized or something. I think we can start to speak up together. So, good job, GDC. Go do it. Fix it. Go fix it.
Any final comments from you, Emma?
No, thanks for all the great questions. Thank you for putting on this fantastic event, Amira.
No, well, this is now the easy part. It's to thank all of you for coming and being a part of this evening, and to also say there's more to do. We need you, right? So each of you in this room have a vital role to play. Some of you are doing it as funders and investors, as distributors, as researchers and advocates and campaigners. We need to ramp it up, you all. 2030, it feels like I'll be here in a heartbeat. But literally, last week I keep saying I was in Liberia, and there are communities that are today already underwater because of the rising sea levels. Full communities underwater in Monrovia, the capital city. So the situation is dire, but I believe we have the collective might. We have the collective power to bring change. And so you've got a number of organizations, and we're saying join us. So one of them is Happy Hour, Clean Energy Happy Hour. How much more fun can it be, right? To come together, to build community, to say that we can be a part of building the future that the world so desperately needs. Come have Happy Hour, right? You also have the Global Distributors Collective, the mailing list to not only get a copy of the State of the Sector report, but to keep in touch with them as they pursue other research on the sector, to understand how collectively we can put our weight towards making sure that the distributors get the access to the financing that they need to have sustainable practices all over the planet. And of course, you have the Solar Sisters leading the way, 10 years and counting, right? Leading the way, anchoring their work in women who are at the backbone of communities, and also leaders in their own right, that are distributors, that are innovators, that are actually making sure that last mile communities are not further marginalized. Join them, join us. SEMA is here, and we're so grateful that you took the time to be here and to share your perspectives with us, but most importantly that you chose to do this work. So we encourage all of you, whatever it is that has been your role, ramp it up. Ramp it up. The situation is dire, the needs are many. We at Shine encourage you to join us, follow us on social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, we're there. We are building a community of practice that will bring funders, investors, philanthropists, impact investors, and faith leaders together to finance the future. And so we ask you to join us. We also want to spotlight Sustainable Energy for All. They are an international UN body that is focused on that sustainable energy by 2030, SDG 7, and they are collectively bringing together governments as well as civil society and financiers as well to make sure that we form a community that continues to work together to build a clean energy future. So join us, keep doing what you're doing, but for tonight, let's celebrate.